So in this video, what we're going to do is take a look at some of the project-based learning Smartsheet resources and Make Sense and how you can use them when addressing the grades 4 or 5 Common Core Language Arts standards. And so basically this is the area that we're going to be targeting, and there are quite a few resources that you can use from the Make Sense strategies for addressing those standards. And so one of the areas I want to point out is there's a section down here called project-based learning. And so each of these contain a series of smart sheets for specific purposes. Like there's smart sheets for planning investigations, conducting investigations, making presentations, and evaluating project processes and outcomes. So let's just take a look at some of the ones for planning investigations. If you click on that, it takes you to this page. And draft plans is a really good one to use with 4th and 5th graders. And so very often when they're working on projects, they're working in teams. And so what the team does is determine what are the various tasks that they're going to have on this project and various things that they're going to have to do. And then for each task, what are the resources they can use to get that task done. Now sometimes they're resources like internet sites, or they can also be human resources like people to interview. They might be technology tools like a wiki or whatever. But basically these are the resources that we can use to help us get this task done. Then for that task, what we're going to do is assign duties, who does what by when, and then for that task we're going to forecast barriers. In other words, what we're doing is to teach kids to anticipate what's a problem they might run into when they're trying to get this task done, and to list that problem here, and then target solutions. So if they run into this barrier, then what do they plan to do about it? And so what we're teaching here is in part getting organized for planning tasks, but we're also teaching them to be proactive and to anticipate what might be some problems and some solutions before they actually happen. And so we do that for each of the various tasks. And of course, there may be more than 4 tasks, so we'd use more than one page of these. And then finally, these boxes over here are the order in which the tasks need to be done. So we might rank order, we might say we need to do this first, then this, etc. Now, another one that I really like from planning projects deals with goals and commitments. And so, for an example, there are 2 primary areas of goals that students can look at. And the first deals with goals for working together effectively. And these are things like listening without interrupting, turn-taking and involving everybody, offering assistance, communicating about difficulties, respecting different opinions, and so forth. And so what we have each team do is to review what these various options are and then check 3 that reflect what their team's goals are going to be. Now, obviously, it would be great if they checked every one of them, but that tends to be overwhelming and too unfocused. And so what we want to do is just have them focus on 3 that they really want to be their goals, because later on we'll be evaluating how well that individual team met their own goals for collaboration. Likewise, there's a set of goals for effective work techniques like habits of the mind. And these are things like using and keeping timelines, resisting impulsivity, engaging in challenging tasks rather than just doing the easy thing, being persistent when things get hard, being creative, viewing an idea in unusual ways or presenting an idea in unusual ways, and so forth. So they do the same thing here in that they target 3 of these to be their goals for effective work habit. And then these are revisited later on from an evaluation perspective. And then down here, what it is basically a sign-off place where students are signing off to make the commitment to developing a high-quality product that they'll be proud of, creating a product that will make sense and interesting and informative to the audience, being neat and careful, doing my share on time, and doing my best. And so what you have are 2 sets of goals and then places for commitments. Now, conducting investigation, there's a series of smart visuals there. So I'm going to share some of those with you. One is information sources. Very often, particularly in today's world, the primary information source is Google. And so students take a topic and they go Google it and they go to Wikipedia or whatnot. And what we're trying to do is get them to branch out and look at a variety of different information sources that they can use. And so, for an example, there are various print resources, which include electronic things like the internet and CD-ROM encyclopedias and so forth, various paper resources like specialty magazines or reference books or specialty books, and of course the textbook and so forth. But there are also human resources like people that they could interview that are experts on their topic, or having somebody demonstrate new ways of using technology, etc. There are various media resources like movies they could check out or television shows related to the topic, pictures and maps. And likewise, there might be some experiences as resources like places they should go visit or things to do. So the idea is they sort of use this as cues to think about what are the topics and questions that they might ask and which resources they might use. The test plans is really for when students are designing experiments. And so the test strategy is just a series of prompts to how to think through designing the experiment. So for an example, to begin with, target a question. So ask what question you hope the experiment or research will provide an answer to. And then basically pick one of these, like what happens to blank when blank is added or subtracted from whatever. What do blank know or think about this topic? How well does something work when you're trying to do this task? How did something change over X amount of time, and so forth. And so these really, on the most part, they're 1, 2, 3, about 7 questions that might be asked in an experiment. And so they pick one and basically fill in the blanks that reflect what their experiment's going to be about. And so they can either complete one of these, or if they think of a different kind of question, they can note it here. The next step is the E step, which is establish the kind of information you're going to need to answer your question. And so if you plan to repeatedly measure something, what are you going to measure and how are you going to measure it? If you plan to count the number of times something happens, then when should the counting occur and how often? If you plan to make a list of observations and then categorize them later, what you would be looking for during the observations. And or if you plan to survey people to get opinions, who will be surveyed and what will you ask them about? And then what we're going to do is the S step, set a plan for collecting your data, which is actually note the steps that you're going to need, and you can use that draft plans strategy that we looked at a few minutes ago to organize those steps. And then what we're going to do is tally the data. And so note the calculations that you're going to need to perform on the data to make sense of it. And so some common ways of doing this is summing the numbers in each category, or computing averages, means, or percentages, or subtracting numbers from different categories to determine differences, or some other calculation. Finally, we're going to show results and decide how the data is going to be visually displayed. And so, for example, you can use tables to show numerical differences, or line graphs, or bar graphs, or pie charts, and so forth. And so the idea is that you can structure the student's experiment by giving them the test strategy and help them get focused on how do you actually design that experiment. Another one also associated with conducting experiments is hypothesis testing. And so we observed this and then specific observations, and that led us to this hypothesis. And what are the details of the hypothesis? So then we tested the hypothesis by doing this, and what was the procedure? And the results of the test led us to conclude that, and what are the details of the conclusion? Now, in terms of making presentations, there's 2 or 3 of them here. I want to share a couple of them with you. One are presentation options. Now, typically what kids are taught to do is to stand up in front of the room with a set of cards, or maybe a PowerPoint presentation these days, and just explain their findings. And what we're trying to do is sort of get them to branch out a little bit and think about there are lots of different ways you can communicate an idea. For an example, there are 2-dimensional visual devices like using graphic organizers. There are maps, photographs, posters, collages, ABC pop-up book, etc. And then there are three-dimensional devices they can use, like create a model or collect some artifacts, or develop some kind of interest center. In terms of written document, there are things besides your basic written report, like you can actually write a histofiction story using the data that you found, but make up a fiction story that uses that data. You could write a script or actually write a commercial about your topic, or an information pamphlet, and so forth. So there are a variety of different written documents you can use besides just your traditional essay. Likewise, another way of communicating your ideas through performance. Now, oral report is definitely a type of performance, but there are a lot of other things like dramatize an event, or actually write a commercial and actually role play the commercial, or have a debate, or present a videotape of an interview, a real interview you had with someone, or some kind of simulation activity or movement, etc. And so what we have the teams do is think about, now what's the idea we want to communicate, and then think about unusual or different ways they might use to communicate that idea. Now, presentation plans really gets into some of the metacognitive aspects of planning a presentation. And so this is a little strategy called PATH. And so what's the purpose of the presentation? And these are different things to check off. For an example, to inform or explain something, or to increase an awareness of an issue or a problem, to change an attitude or a belief, or to show a solution to a problem, or to change a behavior or a way of doing things, or to entertain. And so usually a presentation is going to be one or more of these. And then think about who your audience is. And so if your audience are adults, then they're either going to be teachers or parents. And if the audience are mostly students or friends, they're either going to be younger students, same age students, or older students. Now, depending on who your audience is, then you have to think about your best guess about what your audience already knows about your topic. So for an example, you check this one if your audience doesn't know much about the topic, and it's probably most of the information is going to be new to them. If that's the case, then you're going to need to focus on describing the bigger picture and the basics and avoid a lot of technical language. On the other hand, if your audience has some background knowledge about your topic but probably won't know the specifics, and they may have some misunderstandings about it, therefore we'll need to provide an overview of the big picture, identify common misunderstandings or myths, and then be sure to find technical terms. If the students already know a lot about the topic, and some may even be experts, therefore we'll need to acknowledge their expertise, provide an overview of the big picture, focus on specifics, and it's okay to use technical terms. So we have purpose of the presentation, audience, and then you have topics. And so this first thing is, what's the most important idea you hope your audience will understand as a result of your presentation. So everything you present, and they don't remember anything else, what's the most important idea? And then what are the main ideas related to that? Finally, hook. What would be a good way to begin the presentation that'll make your audience curious about your topic? So this is a planner that students use when they use the PATH strategy to plan and think about some of the more metacognitive aspects of putting together a really good presentation. Now, this last section, evaluating project processes and outcomes, these are a series of rubrics, if you will, that can be used when you're evaluating projects or students are evaluating. So let's just take a look at this first one. Now, if you remember earlier, students set goals for collaboration. And so this is a type of collaboration evaluation device. Now, this can be used to evaluate the teacher evaluating the group, or it can be a peer evaluation, or students' self-evaluation, or a group's self-evaluation. And so here are the various things that were listed earlier about collaboration, like listening without interrupting and turn-taking involving everyone. And you did this really well, or we did this a little, or we really forgot to do this. And so you basically use that as a rubric to go through and look at those critical collaboration behaviors. Great stuff for 4th and 5th graders. Over here are collaboration strategies most effectively used. What did you do best? What are the collaboration strategies that work on more and improve? And then a specific thing to do differently next time. So when this happens, then what are we going to do when that happens in terms of collaboration? Presentation evaluation. It's the same thing in terms of a teacher can use this, or it can be peer self or student self, or group peer evaluation, self-evaluation, or group self-evaluation. And so there are two categories here: the content of the presentation and the performance. So the content, the overall content, has a clear focus. The ideas are tied together with a theme. Ideas are important, accurate, clear, and meaningful, etc. Performance looks at the actual how the presentation unfolded. So, for an example, it's appropriate for a specific audience, like classmates or audiences, etc. It's linked to the audience's background knowledge concerns and it engages the audience, visually appealing and imaginative, and so forth. Now I'm going to skip ahead to into project evaluation to sort of share with you that, but I would encourage you to take a hard look at this previewing the task evaluation, because that really gets into the metacognitive aspects of really scoping out what it is we need to do as well. So let's look at the end of project evaluation. Again, this can be self-evaluation, evaluation of a peer, or a committee or a project team, okay? And it can be who's it about, and then who's doing the evaluation is either myself or the whole team or the teacher. And so what we're looking at are really critical dimensions of what makes a good project work. And so one of those is reliability. And so you have a scale here of you didn't fulfill your obligation, didn't fulfill obligations, couldn't count on, versus fulfilled them extremely well, we could always count on this person. Work quality, poor, high. Doing one share, did far less than their share or far more than their share, and so forth. So you can get a sense that this is a rubric for some of the key characteristics that one brings to the table when they're working collaboratively with other people. So you've got a sense now, hopefully, of some of the resources that are in the project-based learning section of the Make Sense software. And of course, when students are in conducting project, they can use any or all of the various smart sheets that are throughout the program.